lot of turbulence in Trump and Kavanaugh world, but will it make a difference?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
My guest is Joe Camerano, PC's best in political science, right? Here's the thing. Joe and I have been at this for a few years now, where we think, oh, this is the one. And everything just kind of seems to stay the same. And neither one of us really have been wishing the country ill will, that's for sure, nor even Donald Trump ill will, that's for sure. But we keep wondering, when is the line ever going to get crossed? And now we've got the New York Times piece. I haven't yet done a radio program on this, but my guess is that people are going to dial in and say, hey, everyone likes to buck the system if they can. That's what I'm guessing will be the result. But you know, Joe will probably have a thought on that. And then, of course, we've got the Kavanaugh hearings, which are, I guess, warp speeding to some kind of a vote in a couple of days. So I'm interested in Joe's take on that. So in the meantime, let's get right to it and throw the now remember, it's going to move. The news cycle is going to move fast, and we record in the early afternoon, so we'll see what's happened. But this is just uncanny. It really is. Now, I understand the FBI is the White House client, and I understand how all that works, but it is almost unconscionable that the actual accuser in the middle of this whole thing would not be revisited by the FBI. Here's the latest from CBS at press time.
An enthusiastic crowd of supporters in Mississippi chanted their support for embattled Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh last night. The audience cheered as President Trump mocked Christine Blasey Ford's testimony from last week.
I had one beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know.
I drank one beer. Brett and Mark were visibly drunk.
Ford claims Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her when they were in high school. Her lawyer, Michael Bromwich, on Twitter, called the president's attack vicious, vile, and soulless. He went on to write, "Is it any wonder that she was terrified to come forward and that other sexual assault survivors are as well?" The FBI has until the end of the week to finish its reopened background investigation into the multiple sexual misconduct claims against Kavanaugh, all of which he denies. Only a handful of senators are undecided on how they'll vote for the Supreme Court nominee.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait to see what comes back.
It'd be hypocritical for him to make any statements until the investigation's over.
Many of them say if it's proven Kavanaugh lied during his testimony last week, that would be enough to vote against him.
Lied about what, Joe?
It's the small lies, probably. He clearly lied about the extent of his drinking, which, again, is a mystery to me. I'm not ashamed to say that I abused alcohol when I was in college, and if I were testifying, I would probably say, yeah. I remember once waking up and not knowing how I got there. I don't understand why he didn't do that. Part of it's the defensiveness. Part of it was trying to please Trump. I don't know.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Joe Camerano is I think one of the best common sense voices we have. I don't know what camera I'm on here, but we'll fix the lights soon. But the funny thing with you and me is that way back in the day, you thought for sure he couldn't get elected, and then we had that funny scale of percent of confidence. And then finally, both you and I got to the point where we said, okay, enough of this. Like, enough of the predictions, enough of the what?
Yeah, I think we're in a period where sort of all the science that we use to predict what's likely to happen is really not that useful, that we just have to go with the flow, understand where we're flowing, and try to figure out where we've been once it's happened.
I do wonder whether all of that science and polling data and all that election night surprise, not to revisit all the same conversation, but I wonder what the midterm polling numbers actually mean in terms of being able to have some level of confidence as to what's going on out there. You have a feeling about that?
Well, yeah, I think polling is better when you go local. So a congressional district or a state, the polling tends to be a little bit better. The presidential level is where the state level polls got messed up. But the congressional level and Senate level, they were actually fairly reliable.
So the battlefield, you think, is pretty well readable?
Well, not, I think the polls are indicating the direction that we're likely to go. I don't want to fall back on past knowledge, but this is usually not a good year for the incumbent party. Off-year elections usually lead to the other party winning seats. There are exceptions. But I do think we need to just sort of wait and see. It's a mobilization question, really.
And it's also, there's also an enigmatic type of thing about Trump that still, I'm sure, lurks in the projection about midterms, right?
It is. There were a fair number of people who, in 2016, wouldn't admit that they were going to vote for Trump, but did. And those actually tend to be people with college educations, whites with college education particularly. I'm not so sure that this year they're not revealing where they really stand. And again, presidents always face this dilemma. They start doing what they said they're going to do when they were candidates, and people start not liking what they're doing.
So, all right, give me your executive summary on this whole Kavanaugh process. What's your gut take been?
It's horrible. It's bad for everybody involved. It's bad for democracy. It requires that we start acting a little more maturely and rationally, both sides. And, you know, I think this particular hearing is wrecked. Kavanaugh's reputation is probably destroyed for the rest of his career. He can maintain his judgeship. He may even get on the Supreme Court, but no one's going to take him seriously. And we have to figure out how to heal from that and not do it over and over and over again, because it's getting to the point where we were destroying the institution.
Well, was Clarence Thomas, I mean, look, I don't think a lot of people are worrying about Clarence Thomas's Anita Hill controversy now. I mean, we just count his vote.
Clarence Thomas still, whenever he references it, still speaks in very bitter terms, and in terms that show that he's not over it. And I think his silence on the court is in part his general demeanor, but it's in part due to that feeling that
you think he would have been more active
permanently damaged
if he hadn't run into this jam.
Yeah.
But the way this whole thing is gone is just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this.
What I would love to see happen is someone like Chris Coons. So Jeff Flake and Chris Coons are now doing their Dog and Pony show, talking about the idea that come together. If someone like Chris Combs or maybe even Dick Durbin say, look, if after the FBI investigates, if we're satisfied it's a decent investigation, and they say, look, it doesn't look like he's said anything that we can verify as incorrect, they should vote for him. The tradition has been ideology should not be the reason you turn down a Supreme Court justice. Elections matter. We make these decisions through elections. The Democrats need to kind of remember that, because when they're in control, the same thing's going to happen on the other side. And it's going to destroy the institution that we know as the Supreme Court.
Well, I think we've kind of lost track, to be honest with you, as to where the arguments on this whole thing are. We'll come back and talk about that with Joe. In the meantime, I just want to remind you that if you're looking to simplify and make more accessible your financial world, the Card Valet app is a terrific one to have from Navigant Credit Union. Just download it on your phone. I got it right here, and you see everything you want to see about your banking life literally on your app, more so than the average online banking experience. Check it out and join us as a member and enjoy life's journey at Navigant Credit Union. Right back with you. Stay with us.
What he's going through, 36 years ago, this happened. I had one beer, right? I had one beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know.
I don't know what I shake my head at more, him or the people behind him.
For me, it's the people behind him, because I think, you and I have talked about President Trump a lot. I don't expect him to change. He's never been a very nice person. He's always had a killer instinct. He's insulted people as a sport. But the people behind him, whenever I see that, it really disappoints me. They should at least just not seem like they're enjoying it. And part of this is, I had a sister who basically was a victim the way Ford is claiming to be a victim, and I know I'm not alone. And so for me, it's hard to sort of detach that.
Right. Well, the hotline's doubled. National hotline's doubled, and now we're hearing from. I can name 2 women close to me who told me new stories in the last week.
Yeah.
2 close to me, new stories. So, I mean, if anything, she's done a service, and she's added to some of this constructive Me Too conversation. The resentment that he has for that is clear, maybe his life experience. But his boorish behavior aside, and the Republican senators who took him out today saying, you're not helping, aside, here's Mitch McConnell yesterday, and he's got a timetable.
One can only imagine what new bombshell might be published today or tomorrow. But here's what we know, Madam President. One thing for sure. The Senate will vote on Judge Kavanaugh here on this floor this week.
He's done some interesting stuff. He's actually predicted the attempt to move the goalposts, so that when the attempt to move the goalposts occurs, he's already said they're going to try to do that. So it was deft to get out in front, right?
Yeah, and McConnell knows what he's talking about. He's been around quite a long time, and so he knows how this works. And to be honest, I think it's smart that he calls for a vote. I think it's good for everybody that he calls for a vote, even if the investigation is incomplete, because this is one national horror story. And it makes everybody feel bad.
So you think pushing the envelope on a timeline is good anyway?
I think it's good for the country. Get it over with. I don't know whether it's good for Kavanaugh. I'm not sure Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and Jeff Flake could in good conscience vote for him.
Well, but the game
this
is,
week.
I mean, you've been teaching your kids, I'm sure, the game, your students at PC. The game is you don't bring a vote unless you think you got one.
Yeah,
so
that used to be the rule.
Not anymore?
As I said, the problem is everybody's a free agent. Everybody sort of changes their mind from moment to moment based upon what their hunches are telling or what their advisors are telling them. And you can't really whip people the way, WHIP, the whip, get them in line to vote the way they used to be able to. You just can't do that anymore. So he probably he'll never know exactly whether he's got the vote. Look what happened with the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. He didn't know what McCain was going to do. McCain did what McCain thought he
Well,
wanted.
that's a good point. And Flake has been the conscientious one here, and the senators from Alaska and Maine, Collins and Murkowski, are pivotal here. Schumer makes a point saying, look, no matter what happens with this FBI investigation, the public ought to know something about it.
Yeah,
There's a growing consensus in the Senate that when the FBI's investigation is complete, the findings should be released publicly, with any personal information redacted. Why are our Republican colleagues so afraid of making this public? Why are they so afraid of letting all of the records be sent to the committee? Why are they so afraid of us examining the scope of the FBI investigation?
Yeah, I think those are good questions. Now, we know traditionally the FBI backgrounds, if done in chronology with no real fanfare, are confidential.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But I don't know how you put that genie back in that bottle.
I agree, and that's why I think we just need to get it over with. And senators who are on the fence need to kind of remember that John Kennedy wrote Profiles in Courage to suggest that sometimes your principles should guide your decisions, not what's expedient. And I think we just need those who are on the fence to make a decision and move on.
What's your guess? I know I promised Joe 3 shows ago that we wouldn't guess about anything anymore, but I'm violating my promise. What's your guess? Flake, Murkowski, Collins, with an FBI report that reportedly didn't check in with the principals. How can they take a stand for a legitimate extension of the process for a week's worth of background checking and have it come back half done in the public's mind?
To be honest, I don't know. I have a former student who works for Collins, and I have a great deal of trust in that former student and in Collins. She's probably going to make what she thinks is the right decision. I don't know what it is. My best guess is she would love to vote yes, but she probably needs a little more to do that.
Well, what's the little more going to be?
I think
if they bury the FBI investigation, and it's widely known that Kavanaugh and Ford were not checked in with, that multiple, potential other sources of information have not been sought, that the White House has put a grip on this investigation such that it really was nothing more than an exercise in show, if that.
Right. Well, I do think that could sway them to vote no.
Right?
It could sway them to vote no. Well, what I think isn't really material. I study this. I'm trying to do it from an analyst perspective.
Yeah.
And again, the pressure on Murkowski and Flake and Collins from their own side is enormous. And when do you go against your own side these days?
So talk to
only if there's a good reason.
Talk to me about this. There's two questions that lurk. First, I think Trump actually doesn't care if this guy gets.
I think you're right about that.
I don't think he cares.
No, not at all.
I think he thinks, oh, well, it'd be red meat during the midterms if this thing got turned down, and I can go and do 10 more rallies and scream bloody murder and have myself a good time.
I think that's right.
Right. But the other question is about comportment. As a political scientist and someone who leads young people, many of whom go into politics as a profession, what is the message that we send by putting this guy on the court after his comportment this week? I get the pressure. I understand the family hit. I get the reputational thing, and I get the delay, and I get how tough the news and online internet world can be. Get it. But he was nasty.
I think his character shows a major defect in his desirability to be on the court. The way he responded, and particularly his encounter with Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar. I was in Ireland, laying on a hotel bed, watching on my phone, and I thought to myself, I don't think I've ever seen a witness be so rude to a senator in my life. And I've seen organized crime figures.
So when you talk about the good of the country, I understand what you're saying. Listen, let's cut this thing. Let's be done with this and move on, because eventually we're going to get, well, that's the thing. Is it eventually we're going to get a conservative choice? I mean, does the clock...
we're going to get a conservative.
Well, if the clock runs out and the midterms pop up and there's a flip, then all of a sudden the game changes. And that's what everybody on the Republican side is worried about, right?
If Kavanaugh goes down Friday, Saturday there'll be a new appointment.
Bang.
Bang. And probably either before or right after the election, there will be confirmation.
So the swiftness of the process coming to a close versus the message that was sent about comportment, you think the first is more important to pay attention to? Get it done.
Yeah, I think getting it done is important. And remember, Mitch McConnell warned the White House. He said, this is the most difficult person that you have on this list. So I'm sure
for
Mitch
other
McConnell,
reasons.
Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. I don't know exactly why, but they knew that there were all sorts of problems with Kavanaugh that could come forward, and that's probably why they're fighting so hard, because they anticipated it. But yeah, I think they could probably get a pretty clean, squeaky, pretty good vote, like 70 or 80 votes on a conservative justice within 2-3 weeks, if they pick the right one.
Wow. All right, well, we'll leave it there. When we come back, we'll talk about the governor's race, see if Joe's got any insight on that. I'm sure he does. The three candidates at the Channel 12 debate. Look at that's a great clip. Good job, Anita, grabbing that one. She looked so happy. I actually tweeted out that the governor was kind of like saying, "Go Joe, go Joe, it's birthday, keep going." Look at the look. The look is, I love this guy being in this debate. I love this, because Alan Fung has a hard time fighting for himself even alone, never mind getting 2-on-1, right?
Absolutely. I think Trillo being in the race probably makes it 95% certain Raimondo's going to get reelected.
I think with Trillo out of the race, I thought we weren't doing this anymore. That 90 number for you, that 90 number for you is a dangerous number. That's the number you used on the 90% sure Trump wouldn't get elected back in the beginnings of our conversations.
All right.
But I get it. She's a 43. She's going to spend $7 million securing 43, 44, maybe 45% of the vote. I think Alan Fung just has a hard time anyway. But Trillo was one of these guys who believes that he has a right to go. He has a disdain for Fung, which is, I doubt, going to lend toward a cooperative, all right, I'll bail at the end of the session here, season. I think everyone's just shoulder shrugging like you and I are. Right? Yeah, she's going to win. There's no vision, there's no thing, there's no da-da-da-da, but yeah, she's going to win.
I was a little worried because there was really no good polling in the primary that she, well, not worried. I was thinking maybe she was going to have a tougher fight against Matt Brown.
Because she's stuck.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean in the primary?
Against Matt Brown in the primary.
And she blew him away.
And she blew him away. And so if she had been weaker against him, I would think that maybe there was some sort of wiggle room for Trillo or for Fung. But to be honest, if you look at the base, you know, the people who wouldn't vote for her because of the pension issues went to a guy who's not in the race this time. They're not necessarily going to Trillo, and they're not going to go to Fung either. And so where are they going to go?
Right.
They're either going to have to stay home or they're going to have to vote for Raimondo.
Right. And she just as soon have people stay home because she's got her own constituency that is to her credit, solid. I mean, she's not been a quantum failure by any stretch. And I mean, she looks gubernatorial aesthetically. She's never embarrassed the state.
And she's really popular with the corporate community.
Well, she's more popular outside Rhode Island. I mean, she could be a VP candidate with Bloomberg.
He told me that.
I told him that. But I mean, she has a much better. She was able to fundraise outside the state with droves of millions. She's very popular outside the state. She's got that market cornered. Inside, she's got problems. But for continuity, I think people might just go, yeah, whatever. Because I don't think what is Ellen Fung's brand? Do you know? What is it?
No,
I'm not her.
I'm not her. I'm mayor of Cranston.
My turn.
Yeah, right. And again, I think Fung probably would be a much better governor than people would assume. But he's not a very good candidate. He doesn't seem to generate any kind of excitement.
All right. Does Kavanaugh get confirmed, yes or no? 5 seconds.
I'm going to punt. I don't know, but if I had to say something, I'd say yes.
Okay. Good to see you. Last word next. We revisit an interesting conversation on unions and negotiations that occurred here a couple of weeks ago. Tomorrow night, a little day off. Friday, brand new show with Corey Brettschneider, who did appear last week, but we expand the conversation on constitutionality and his new writings on that. Columbus Day, we'll take a look back at some education issues and get right back with local original programming on Tuesday after Columbus Day. Just some programming notes for you. In the meantime, from 3 to 6 tomorrow, listen to WPRO and dial in. I'm guessing this hearing news cycle will begin to wrap up. And if the professor has his way, it will end. The misery of it all will end this week. Have a great night. See you.